My name is Aaron Salzman. I am a combined MFA MA degree candidate here at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Today I want to talk about a topic that I get a lot of questions about, and that is, what was your process like applying to the MFA program? When I first got into this program, it was just for the MFA. It's sort of like a mythical program. You know, people know that it's kind of hard to get into. It's this artsy sort of interesting beast that people kind of talk around. And today I want to just talk about it a little bit, maybe lower some of the barriers of entry, and just tell you a little bit about my story and my process for how I ended up all the way out here in Alaska at this program for my writing. I went to undergraduate at the College of Worcester in Ohio, very small liberal arts school. Absolutely loved the place. I was a diver on the swim team, got involved in all sorts of activities there, and I graduated in 2017. In my graduation year, I was able to win an award for a manuscript that I wrote for the English department, and that manuscript has since lived on my shelf for a very long time. Right after undergrad, I kind of had a couple options. I could try to run with that manuscript, or I could join the real world, become an adult, get a real job. And I went with getting the real job. You know, I had never really worked that full-time job before. I wanted to see what life was like. And so I got a job with Teach for America. I moved out to Milwaukee, and I stayed there for 2 years. I taught at the Hmong American Peace Academy as well as a couple other schools, and I was mostly teaching first-generation English speakers. I love teaching English, I love teaching writing, and I love teaching critical thinking, which to me is what a lot of literature and writing is about. So it was a great job. I felt a lot of guilt leaving teaching, but I knew that there was something I had left on the table and wanted to get back to. And that thing that I left on the table was my manuscript. I really wanted to get back to writing. Now, I'd always been big into reading. I read a lot of books, mostly fantasy and sort of knight mythology type of fiction. As I got older, I turned a little bit more to literature. Cormac McCarthy is an author I often cite. As I was getting out of teaching, I was thinking to myself, what is it that I actually want to do? Well, I want to try to go back to my own manuscript, and I want to try to write. I want to try to be an author. That's what I wanted to do. Now, if you're just starting out trying to be an author and you don't have a ton of money saved up, and I didn't really, coming from teaching, there are a couple of different options you can go for. One of those options being you can go to an MFA program, which is a Master's of Fine Arts graduate school, and go there and spend 2 or 3 years writing. Now, something that was really essential to me when I was applying to these programs was that I wanted to get into a fully funded program. For me, going and getting a degree in fine arts, there's no guarantee that you're going to be making a lot of money afterwards, especially with your art. I wanted to know that at least for the time that I was working on my writing, I was good, it was funded, it was paid for, and usually when you get that funding, it comes with a TA-ship. So I was getting valuable experience teaching courses at the college level, another thing that I really wanted to do. A lot of people look at the MFA differently and they look at the process differently. Some people want to be low residency, which means that they're not living at the school, they're not doing it full time, they're sort of writing on the side, taking classes, and forming relationships with professors. For me, I knew that I had to go to one of these fully funded programs in order to survive for the next couple of years. I sat down, and as I was finishing up teaching, wrapping up the school year, I started putting my applications together. I left, I took a summer job at a camp that I love to work at, and for the next couple of months, I was working a little bit on the side and working on my applications. As I was working on these applications, I was working on my old manuscript from undergrad, and I realized that I had grown a lot in 2 years, and what I had written those years ago didn't really live up to the expectations that I had for what I wanted to be writing in the future. I had read a lot more literature, I had read a lot more books, and I had started to realize how far I needed to come if I was actually going to be a good writer. I took a lot of time to figure out my writing sample, to rewrite certain passages, and to write new ones. The most important part of the application process to me was proving to these professors and to the graduate school that I'm good enough to take on for this period of time in order to help me become an even better writer. So I took a long time, and I rewrote, and I wrote again, and I rewrote, and I put together my list of graduate schools. I tried to stick with the fully funded programs. I'll have to admit, I got a little bit antsy, and so I put on some programs that were not fully funded, just because I had heard, probably like many of you if you're watching this video, that these MFA programs are incredibly hard to get into. That the acceptance rate statistically, you have a better chance of getting into Harvard Medical School than you do getting into an MFA program. Now, this is a classic example of the fact that sometimes statistics lie depending on how you frame them. Yes, the percentage might technically be lower, but if you take into account all the other variables, is it actually harder to get into an MFA program for writing than it is to get into Harvard Medical School? I don't think so. I have not done the full study on that, but that's just my opinion there. Some of these statistics can kind of freak you out, especially, we want to view as creatives that our field is not competitive, that there's room for everybody, that all the art can come out and can achieve and can do really well. Yes, that is true when we're out in the world, but when it does come to these applications, it is a extremely competitive proposition. We're applying for maybe 3 to 10 spots, and there are often 1,000, 2,000, even 3,000 applications to some of the most popular programs. So you really are competing for one of these special spots. As I was doing these applications, I included a couple of non-fully funded programs, and I also included an MA program. That MA program I did get into, and I have to admit as well that I had that sort of as a backup program that I was planning to go to. I'm happy I did not end up doing that. That wasn't really the right program for me, and I made that decision thinking to myself, what if I don't get into the MFA? In retrospect, I wouldn't have applied to that program. It just wasn't what I was trying to do. I take a long time, get my application together, and I send them all out. I think that this would probably be in early January, maybe mid-February, the last applications go out. Now, I know that I'm going to be hearing back from most of these schools by April 12th. So I go on the MFA draft page on Facebook, I go on Marketplace, online, I go to all these different websites where people post whether or not they've heard from the schools, their rejections, their acceptances. One thing I'll recommend, don't do that. There's nothing worse than seeing somebody get accepted to the school that you really want to go to and you haven't heard back, and then you're biting your fingernails and you're waiting and you're nervous. It ended up just causing me more stress, and I was wasting time perusing these websites looking for who had gotten in and who hadn't. And so during that time, I was a little bit less productive than I usually am and that I like to be, just because I was focused too much on the wrong stuff. Fast forward, and I start hearing back from some schools. I got a wave of rejections to start. I applied to, I believe, 12 schools, and I, right out of the gate, got 5 rejections pretty quickly, too. So let's say I finished my applications in February, March, April. March, I was getting a lot of my rejections. So you start getting nervous, right? Because I'm applying to schools all over the country. I'm really going for the program. I'm not going, just because I'm trying to go somewhere close to home. And so I don't really know where I'm going to go to. I ended up getting a couple of different options. One of the options that I really like, a school I really like and that I will name just because I like it so much, is Stony Brook. That was a school I really did want to go to, but I did not end up getting the full funding. So I was sort of holding out hope and trying to figure out where it was I was going to go. I got into a couple other schools with pretty good funding opportunities, but not fully funded. There's another school that I loved that I got waitlisted at. And I waited and I waited, and I was behind one other person, and that person ended up accepting their position at the last second. So I thought I was going to go to that school. It turns out that position was not available for me right at the last second. And that was a little bit devastating too. So that's sort of the interior of how it works behind the scenes. A lot of these slots, they're reserving for individual people based on the individual work that they're turning in. So it's nothing against you if you don't get in. It's just, what are these professors looking for? What kind of work does the school usually publish? Does your content align with the kind of stuff that they're teaching or that they want to be teaching? I go forward, and this is something that some people recommend against. I'm a huge proponent of this. I started calling the schools that I hadn't heard back from in April. And as it turns out, a couple of schools had some trouble either processing my application or hadn't gotten information back to me. This is kind of a crazy story about UAF, which is the school I ended up coming to. I was told that I was on a wait list for UAF, and I called a couple of times. I kept being told I was on a wait list. Finally, I had a call with a professor here. So I spent the first 10 minutes on the phone with this professor thinking that I was being interviewed for the last slot, off of the wait list. Meanwhile, the professor is, asking me about my life and asking me if I have questions about the program. And he's sort of dancing around the conversation a little bit, almost like he's trying to sell me on the school. At a certain point, I kind of paused in the conversation. And I said, Daryl, who's my advisor now, I said, Daryl, have I been accepted to UAF? He said, yes, we accepted you months ago. I was, it's funny in retrospect. At the time, I wasn't super happy about it because I had been waiting for months to hear back from the school. I had even called and, I hadn't heard back. Anyways, it was just a little bit of an administrative slip. I'll admit that this was the year 2020 during COVID, and so there was a lot of staff turnover and a lot of bureaucratic things were falling through the cracks. And so I don't think it's anybody's fault, really. I ended up having 2 days to decide, was I going to go to New York City or was I going to move out all the way out to Fairbanks, Alaska? With these programs, they're competitive enough where you get the spot and usually you decide to end up going. So I was still waiting to hear back from Stony Brook about certain types of funding, and maybe I was going to get a TA-ship, but probably not. At University of Alaska Fairbanks, they said, we really want you to come here. Your content aligns with ours. You're getting the TA-ship. You're one of the first on the list to get the TA-ship. We really want you to come here, Aaron. What do you say? Are you going to come here? And with that pitch, I really couldn't do anything else. I said, of course, I'm going to come there. The content did align with the Great North exploration, the kind of stuff that I wanted to do. I read a lot of the professors' fiction online. I really liked what they were writing. I liked the sentence structure, the kind of stories that they were telling. So I said, yes, I'm going to come to the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Now, I had never actually seen the school. I had never been to Alaska. I hadn't even really ever been to the West Coast. So this was a really huge move for me. In later videos, I'll talk about the drive. I drove from Vermont all the way to Fairbanks, Alaska, and that's a whole different story in itself. But anyways, I just want to tell you a little bit about my story, how I ended up coming to this program, how I got in, and it really has been a blessing. And now I'm here at the end of my 3rd year. I couldn't have asked for a better place, and I'm really happy to have come here. I meet all sorts of great people. I've got 2 people right now working behind the scenes. I didn't ask them beforehand if I could say their names. Can I say your names? Shaylease and Kevin. You're only as good as the people that you have help from. And writers especially, you come from a community. No idea is really just your own. It's all the ideas accumulated that you get from the people and the literature and the experiences around you. And so I'm just really grateful that I ended up coming here. If you have any questions about applying to the MFA programs, about my own process, just about anything that I've said today, feel free to leave a comment. I will respond to every comment on this video. It's one of our first videos. I'm hoping to gain some more steam and put out about 1 a week. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Once again, my name is Aaron Salzman. If you liked the video, please give it a like. Please subscribe. We've got more content coming. Once again, thank you so much. Make sure you drink enough water, get enough sleep, and we'll be with you next time. Have a good one.